I'm excited about this topic that we're going to get into this hour because it's fascinated me, especially now. We've seen a shift in the whole debate and discussion about the United States and where it should be in the world today. There have been, by way of this group, some workshops or town hall meetings. And William, I'll just describe a little bit, but you can fill in the gaps. So basically, these town hall meetings are being done around the country, and you're soliciting comment from average Americans about what their feelings are on the United States and where it should be. And I've got a lot of ideas. I know Rick probably has a lot of ideas. But one thing all of us can agree on is that there seems to be a lot of changing going on about how the world is perceiving us.
Absolutely, and you described it perfectly, Keith. It's exactly that. It's a 2-year initiative. We started the last half of last year, and we went to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, held 3 forums there with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, with the Johnstown Heritage Association, and with the YWCA. And then we went to Cincinnati, and we met with a civic engagement group at Northern Kentucky. We met with an Islamic center, a mosque, actually outside of Cincinnati. So what we're trying to do with this program is go around the country to 10 different locations that we selected to try and get a real cross-section of the country, and hold these forums where people come and express what they think we ought to be focusing on in the world. And in the course of doing that, in 3 to 5 forums in 10 different cities, we think we're going to get a good cross-section of America. And it's really about what people want. We don't come in. We're sponsoring the forums, and we do them with our local partners. And we're choosing groups that are active in their communities, that have a membership, and that are interested in civic affairs.
And the group is called Fund for Peace?
The Fund for Peace.
Fund for Peace. Now, is there any political affiliation with Fund for Peace?
No.
People may assume that it's more of a liberal group, and I don't even like using that term, liberal or conservative, but everyone's going to wonder where the dollars come from on this kind of program.
No, exactly. And of course the name, I think a lot of people assume that it may be a forum that hosted by such a group, but that name might be an anti-war forum or an anti-Iraq forum or something. But in fact, we're not. We're a research and education organization based in D.C., but what we like to say is we do cutting-edge research on problems of assessing conflict, predicting conflict. We came up with a patented model of assessing what factors cause conflict, and we're now working on a new project where we analyze factors in order to be able to predict conflict. So that's one major area that we're working on. And for your listeners, every summer in the June or July-August issue of Foreign Policy magazine, we publish what we call the Failed States Index. We look at 177 countries and look at 12 factors and try and determine what countries are in danger of failing. And that's published on our website and on Foreign Policy Magazine's website. So I encourage your readers to look at that this summer.
Well, is there a common factors or a common thread in failed states?
Yes, absolutely. And some of them are, we'll just give you an example. The top of the list this past year was Somalia. So we're hearing a lot about Somalia in the news, the piracy off its coast. But central to a failed state would be huge demographic problems, say a lot of refugees, inability to feed their populations, lack of governance, strong external influence. For example, in Somalia, Ethiopia was occupying most of Somalia for about 2 years. So those are several factors. Group grievances, where there are different communities that are at war against each other. For example, in Iraq with the Shia and the Sunni factions. Uneven economic development, political legitimacy, whether the governments are in fact viewed as illegitimate by much of the population. So there are 12 different factors that we look at that, and consequently we rank them. It doesn't say these countries are going to blow, but what it does say is these are factors, and based upon our analysis, these countries are at risk.
One of the things we're hearing periodically from talking heads, analysts, is that Mexico is on the brink of failing as a country. How do they rank on your failed state list?
I should have looked before we came into the studio here. I don't think they're in the top. Foreign Policy publishes the top 60, and then we do rankings for 177. We do measures for 177. I think, obviously the closer you are to the border, the more grave this situation is to you. And, people living here have relatives there. You travel back and forth. Your trade, your commerce is so important there. So it's much more vital to you here. I would say certainly the fact that I was just reading a story in the Sun News this morning, an opinion piece about the justice system in Mexico and how so many people are never actually brought to trial, or they're released, or the prosecution. So that would be one area that I would look at in terms of whether that's affecting that country's ability to be stable, is whether the justice system is serving. And certainly economic development. We know there's a lot of poor people in Mexico. We also know there's a lot of rich people in Mexico too. So those would be factors that that come to mind that would show up on that index.
Getting back to your project, the project specifically, you intend to collect this information and make some kind of report available to Washington? That's
right. So all of the different groups we meet with, we take their actual voices. We're audio recording the forums.
Okay.
And so we're going to produce what I hope will be an interesting little DVD with a written report, and we're going to distribute it to all of Washington policymakers, main people in the administration, Congress, news media, and think tanks, so that all of this, the 40 or so forums we end up holding, maybe 1,000 people that we end up reaching, those voices will be amplified and policymakers will be hearing it. Our presumption is that during the 2008 campaign and this recent financial crises that we've been underneath, is that the politicians have been focused on the here and now. And we're asking people in these forums to look 5, 10, 20 years out, priorities rather than just a current affairs discussion.
And with Barack Obama, you keep hearing that long-distance kind of planning, even beyond his presidency, whether it's 4 years or 8 years. He's always talking about planning well outside of his presidency. What are you finding out in the country, and then Las Cruces specifically? What have you found? What are the people saying?
Well, let me start with Las Cruces, because what's interesting so far, and as I said, we held 3 forums in Johnstown, 4 in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati area, and then we've held 2 this week, and the third one will be Friday. KRWG is actually taping one of the forums, which will then be on the TV probably in May, broadcast in May. But I would say probably the common threads are what's most interesting. There's a real concern that no matter how we act or whatever goals we have in the world, we have to take care of what's going on at home. It's not so much an isolation sort of thing, but more that we have, if we're going to do whatever we want in the world, we have to have a solid foundation. And so there's a real concern with civic values. There's a concern with education. That came out very strongly in the 2 here in particular in Las Cruces. That education is a means to for countries to lift their populations out of poverty, to have rule of law in their countries, to avoid conflict. But it's also vital here. We need education to educate the next job, the next workers. We need education to build civic values, to have people sacrifice, to have people learn to respect institutions and contribute to their societies. So those are some of the themes that have come forward so far.